Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The cold was unbearable. Isaac Lane's breath turned to ice in front of his face as the wind howled around him, tearing at his clothes. His fingers were numb, his body shaking uncontrollably as he trudged through the snow, his boots barely making an impact on the thick blanket of white that covered the alien world. His ship had crashed days ago, and now, it was nothing more than a twisted wreckage, half buried in the snow, a few miles behind him. His comms were fried, and the emergency beacon had long since stopped transmitting. Isaac had seen many things in his life as a starship mechanic, but never had he felt this helpless. The harsh winds and biting cold of the planet, which he had initially thought to be nothing more than an inconvenience, were now a slow death sentence. He had heard about places like this, remote, desolate worlds, planets that had long been abandoned by the major galactic powers, left to their natural elements. A frozen wasteland. And yet, despite his survival training, despite his endless hours of preparing for disasters like this, Isaac's human body wasn't designed for the extreme cold of a world that had never been inhabited by any species, not even the hardiest of life forms. He stumbled, his vision blurring. He was almost certain that he would pass out soon, the cold creeping into his bones and sapping the last bit of warmth from his body. With every step, Isaac's mind wandered. He thought of his family back home on Earth, his friends, and the life he had left behind in the stars. But in this moment, it felt like they were all far away, like they existed in a completely different universe. His hands shook more violently as he struggled to keep moving, but he knew he couldn't stop. Not yet. A part of him had hoped, just a small part, that he would be found. That a rescue ship would come, that someone would hear his distress signal. But no one had come. And now, as the snow continued to fall in thick sheets around him, his hope was starting to fade. His movements became slower, his legs heavier, and the world around him began to close in, the swirling snow a blinding, suffocating mass. "Help," he gasped, but the wind swallowed his words. Then, just as his feet gave out beneath him, and he felt himself begin to collapse into the snow, something unexpected happened. A soft, almost musical hum filled the air, breaking through the noise of the storm. Isaac barely had the strength to turn his head, but through the thick, swirling white, he saw them. At first, he thought they were a mirage, some strange manifestation of his mind as he teetered on the edge of consciousness. 4 figures emerged from the snowstorm, moving with graceful precision, their forms radiating an almost ethereal glow. They were like nothing he had ever seen before, tall, slender, with smooth, iridescent skin that shimmered like starlight. Their eyes, bright and intense, locked onto him as they approached. Isaac could barely make sense of the sight. His mind was foggy, his vision distorted. He wondered if this was some kind of dream, a last, delirious hallucination before the cold claimed him. But the figures were too real, too tangible. They were too beautiful to be anything but real. The closest of the 4 women stepped forward, her long hair flowing behind her like a silver stream. She crouched beside him, her expression soft yet filled with something that resembled concern. "You are dying," she said, her voice musical and soothing, though Isaac could barely understand her words. He tried to speak, to ask who they were, to beg them for help, but his mouth barely moved, his tongue frozen. His body trembled uncontrollably as his mind fought to stay alert. His eyes fluttered as the woman reached toward him, her hands glowing faintly as they made contact with his cold skin. Heat. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, warmth began to spread through his body, starting at the point of contact and radiating outward. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, gentle, soothing, yet impossibly powerful. The cold that had taken over his limbs slowly began to recede, replaced by an unfamiliar sensation of strength, vitality, and energy. But the heat wasn't the only thing that affected him. There was something different about her touch. Something alien. The warmth wasn't just physical, it was as though it was seeping into his very essence, reinvigorating him, pulling him from the brink of death. Isaac blinked and focused on her face, her glowing eyes now fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart race. He felt an inexplicable pull, a magnetic force that compelled him to trust her. He had no idea what was happening, but in this moment, it didn't matter. The other 3 women stood around him, their eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Each of them was as stunning as the first, their features impossibly perfect, yet somehow inhuman. Their skin shimmered in the light of the storm, as though they were made of stardust, and their presence seemed to fill the air with an aura of otherworldly energy. The first woman, who had been the one to reach out to him, nodded gently. "We will save you," she said, her voice echoing in his mind, clearer now. "You are not alone." Isaac could barely comprehend the words, but in that moment, as the warmth continued to spread through his body, he knew that somehow, these women, these beings, were his salvation. But he didn't know how long he had been lost to the cold, how long he had been on the verge of death. He didn't know who they were, where they came from, or what their intentions were. All he knew was that in that instant, for the first time since his crash, he had hope. And as the mysterious women bent over him, their hands glowing, the cold wind howling around them, Isaac allowed himself to believe that there was still a chance for him to survive, no matter how strange the path ahead might be. The storm raged around them, but for Isaac, in the warmth of their presence, it didn't matter anymore. Isaac's eyes fluttered open, the warmth enveloping him like a protective cocoon. He could feel his body coming back to life, his fingers tingling as circulation returned, his frozen muscles starting to loosen. The ache in his chest from the cold was slowly replaced by a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in days. The storm that had been howling around him now seemed distant, muffled, as though it were no longer a threat. The 4 women were still there, surrounding him, each of them casting a faint, otherworldly glow. They stood perfectly still, their movements graceful and fluid, almost like they weren't quite touching the ground. Their presence felt transcendent, as if they belonged to a different plane of existence altogether. Their beauty was striking, but it wasn't just their looks, it was the energy they radiated, an aura of power and mystery that left Isaac in awe. The first woman, the one who had touched him, had a serene expression on her face, as if she were focusing intently on him. Her hand still hovered near his skin, the faint warmth of her touch lingering as if she were transferring something vital into him. Her eyes met his, glowing like twin stars in the dimming light of the storm. "You are strong," she said again, her voice soft but resonating deep within his chest. "Stronger than you know." Isaac blinked, still dazed. "Who are you?" His voice rasped, as if his vocal cords had been frozen too. She smiled, the curve of her lips mesmerizing in its grace. "We are the Rylith," she said, her voice echoing in his mind. The name sounded ancient, powerful. "We came because you called to us." Isaac struggled to sit up, his body still weak but rapidly gaining strength. The warmth that had filled him was still there, coursing through his veins, and with it came a strange sense of clarity. The panic, the fear, the desperation, all of it seemed distant now. Even the cold, which had been so overwhelming just moments ago, was but a faint memory. "What, do you mean I called to you?" Isaac's words felt odd in his mouth. It was hard to believe any of this was real. He was stranded on a planet that wasn't even on any star charts, surrounded by 4 alien women who looked like something out of a myth. One of the other women stepped forward, her movements graceful but purposeful. She had dark, almost translucent skin that shimmered with an ethereal, deep violet hue. Her eyes were large and dark, her face framed by short, flowing hair that seemed to shift like liquid. Her presence was commanding, yet somehow gentle. "You did not call to us in the way a human might call for help," she explained, her voice deep and melodic. "But you reached out. Through the stars. Through the fabric of the universe itself." Isaac furrowed his brow, still trying to make sense of the situation. "I don't understand. I didn't do anything. I was just surviving." The woman interrupted softly, but there was something in her tone that made him pause. Yes, you were surviving. But not just physically. Your spirit reached out to us. It cried for help, for warmth, for connection. Isaac's chest tightened. He felt like he was drowning in their words, each one heavier than the last, like the weight of the universe was pushing down on him. And yet, the warmth within him continued to grow, spreading to the very depths of his being, as if these women, these Rylith, were not only saving his life but awakening something inside him he didn't even know existed. The fourth woman, who had been standing silently by the edge of the group, moved forward with a sudden fluidity that caught Isaac's attention. She was the tallest of the four, with shimmering golden skin that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of some hidden heartbeat. Her hair, a mix of iridescent colors, cascaded down her back like liquid light. Her eyes, bright green and piercing, locked onto his with an intensity that made Isaac's pulse race. She knelt beside him, her presence almost overwhelming. Your species, she began, her voice laced with an alien curiosity, has a unique power. A power to create connections, to alter the very fabric of space and time through emotion. Through your will. Isaac swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. He had no clue what they were talking about. He was just a human, average, unremarkable, working on a damaged starship that had broken down in the middle of nowhere. Yet here he was, surrounded by beings who spoke of powers beyond anything he could comprehend. I don't understand, he stammered. I didn't do anything special. I'm just a mechanic. I was just trying to survive. The woman's eyes softened, and she placed her hand on his chest, her touch gentle but strong. The warmth that radiated from her was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he felt his heart race at the connection. Survival is a powerful force, Isaac Lane, she said, her voice laced with reverence. It is a force that drives even the smallest creature to unimaginable feats. But you, human, you have something more. Isaac's head spun, his thoughts tangled in confusion. The storm was no longer a threat, the cold had vanished, and his body was now fully alive. But his mind, still struggling to catch up with the reality of the situation, was overwhelmed. You are not alone, the first woman, the one who had first reached out to him, said. We are not here just to save you. We are here to help you discover what lies within you, something that has been hidden, even from yourself. He could feel it now, the strange, subtle pulse of energy beneath his skin. It was as though something was awakening, something deep within him, just beneath the surface, ready to burst forth. The warmth he had felt before intensified, and Isaac realized it wasn't just the women who were heating his body. It was something more, something that connected him to them, something that he had never known existed. But there was also a question gnawing at him, a fear that was starting to take root in his mind. Why? Why are you helping me? What do you want from me? The second woman, the one with the violet skin, regarded him thoughtfully, her expression almost sad. We do not need anything from you, Isaac. But your species, your humanity, holds great potential. Potential we wish to understand. And in turn, perhaps, you will come to understand yourself. The answer only left him with more questions, but for the first time since he had crashed, he felt the weight of despair begin to lift. The storm still raged outside, but Isaac wasn't afraid anymore. He didn't know what was coming, or why these beings had chosen him, but he no longer felt alone. As the Rylith gathered around him, their presence like a warm, comforting fire in the cold wilderness, Isaac made a decision. Whatever path lay ahead, whatever strange journey was unfolding, he would walk it. Because in that moment, he realized that the survival instinct that had kept him alive had transformed into something else entirely, something beyond physical survival. And he was ready to discover what that was. Isaac's heart pounded as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. His body was no longer numb, no longer frozen in place by the relentless cold of the planet. The alien women, the Rylith, had revived him, but their presence was now a constant hum in the back of his mind, like a connection he couldn't fully grasp but could never ignore. He stood slowly, testing his legs, feeling the solid ground beneath him once again. His thoughts raced as the four women watched him, their glowing eyes tracking his every movement, their calm demeanor betraying no sign of impatience or judgment. It was as if they already knew what was happening to him, or perhaps, they had been waiting for this moment. "You must learn to trust the warmth," the first woman, the one with the silver hair and radiant skin, said gently, her voice still echoing in his mind. "The warmth is more than just the physical heat you feel. It is a connection, a bond to the universe itself. You must allow it to guide you." Isaac met her gaze. There was no denying the power in her words, in the way she carried herself. The other three women remained silent, their expressions unreadable, yet somehow still warm, welcoming. "Trust the warmth," Isaac muttered to himself, repeating her words. "I don't even know who you are." "We are the Rylith," the woman said again, her voice soft but firm. "We are ancient travelers of the stars. We search for those like you, those who possess the potential to awaken to a power far beyond that which you know." Isaac blinked, a growing unease in the pit of his stomach. He glanced at the other women, noting their alien beauty, their unearthly grace. He felt a flicker of disbelief, like he was caught in a dream. "I don't understand," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I'm just a mechanic. I'm no one special." The golden-skinned woman, the tallest of them all, stepped forward. Her presence was commanding yet gentle, as though she could crush him with a word, but wouldn't dream of it. "Humanity is special," she said, her voice quiet but filled with strength. "You have a unique gift, a spark of potential that no other species possesses in the same way. You are connected to the stars in a way that is difficult to explain. But you must trust in it, Isaac. You must allow it to awaken." Isaac shook his head, confusion clouding his thoughts. "Awaken to what? What are you asking me to do?" "We are not asking you to do anything, Isaac," the woman with the violet skin said. "We are here to show you what you are capable of, to help you realize the power within you. But first, you must understand. The cold, the isolation, it is all part of a larger test, one that humans like you are uniquely equipped to pass." Isaac's mind reeled. He was still trying to wrap his head around the idea that these women were somehow connected to him, that they believed he had a hidden potential. He had always thought of himself as average, just another mechanic, fixing broken ships and tools, living a life that had been nothing more than a series of mundane tasks. Now, here he was, on an unknown planet, surrounded by beings who seemed to see something in him that he couldn't even begin to understand. "But I don't know how to awaken anything," Isaac said, his voice laced with uncertainty. "What are you talking about?" The woman with the golden skin stepped closer, and Isaac could feel her presence growing stronger, almost palpable. "You already have it within you," she said softly. "The strength, the survival instinct, the connection to the universe, it is all part of you. The cold could not take it from you, because it is part of who you are." Isaac stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. The survival instinct. It made sense, in a way. He had survived the crash, the freezing cold, the isolation, when everything else would have succumbed to the environment. But how could that be a power? How could it be connected to the stars? He wanted to argue, to say that he was nothing special. That he had just fought to stay alive, nothing more. But there was something about the way these women spoke, the way they looked at him, that made him hesitate. One of the other women, the one with the shimmering dark violet skin, stepped forward. "Isaac," she said, her voice soft and soothing, "allow us to show you." Without waiting for him to respond, she reached out, her hand glowing faintly as she placed it gently on his chest. The warmth was immediate, flowing from her touch and spreading outward, until it coursed through him like a river of light. It was not physical warmth, it was something deeper, something beyond his comprehension. It was as though her energy was mingling with his own, awakening something buried deep within him. Isaac gasped, his breath catching in his throat. His mind swirled with images, flashes of distant stars, of cosmic forces at work in the universe. He saw himself, standing not just on this planet, but within the vast expanse of space, connected to everything around him. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, he felt a deep, profound sense of clarity. He felt something he couldn't describe, an energy, a force, flowing through him, awakening his senses, sharpening them in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was as if every part of him, every molecule of his being, had been tuned to some higher frequency. He could feel the planet beneath his feet, the energy of the world pulsing in time with his own heartbeat. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation faded. Isaac stood there, his body trembling slightly, his mind buzzing with the after-effects of the experience. "What was that?" he whispered, still trying to catch his breath. The Rylith were silent for a moment. The first woman, the one who had originally reached out to him, stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "That was the beginning, Isaac," she said softly. "The beginning of understanding your true potential. The warmth is not just a physical sensation. It is a power that connects all living things. It flows through everything, the stars, the planets, the very fabric of the universe itself." Isaac closed his eyes, trying to process what had just happened. He had felt it. That power. It was unlike anything he could have imagined. His survival instincts had been sharpened, yes, but this was something more. It was as though he had tapped into a force that had always been there, just waiting for him to discover it. "You are ready," the golden-skinned woman said, her voice filled with pride. "You have begun to awaken. And now, you must learn to harness this power, to use it not just for yourself, but for the greater good. For the survival of your people." Isaac looked up at her, his mind swirling with 1,000 questions. "My people?" he repeated, his voice cracking with disbelief. The woman smiled, her eyes full of something akin to affection. "Yes, Isaac. Humanity is destined for great things. But first, you must believe in yourself, as we believe in you." Isaac took a deep breath, the weight of their words settling over him like a mantle. He didn't understand everything yet. But he knew one thing for certain, his life was no longer defined by survival alone. The Rylith had shown him that. And now, he had a greater purpose, a purpose that had nothing to do with the mundane life he had known before. He was ready to embrace it. The world around Isaac seemed to have shifted. The cold that had once gnawed at his bones had vanished, replaced by an electric warmth that pulsed within him. His mind was still reeling, struggling to grasp the magnitude of what had just happened, but there was no denying it, something deep within him had changed. The Rylith stood around him, their otherworldly presence still emanating that same comforting aura, as though they were guardians of a secret knowledge that now flowed through his veins. He had survived. That much was clear. But what was he supposed to do now? What was this power they had awakened within him? And how could he possibly understand it when everything he had known before seemed so small, so insignificant in comparison? The tall, golden-skinned Rylith woman, who had been the first to speak of his potential, studied him carefully, her eyes shining with an unreadable expression. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "The connection." Isaac nodded slowly, his hand instinctively reaching for his chest, as though he could touch the force that pulsed inside him. "I do. It's like I don't know. Connected to everything. The planet. The stars. I can feel it all." The golden woman's lips curved into a knowing smile. "It is not just the planet or the stars, Isaac. It is the fabric of existence itself. You are beginning to tap into something ancient, something that transcends the limits of your species. The energy that flows through the universe is not just a force, it is a living thing, interconnected with all forms of life." Isaac's mind struggled to follow her words, but there was something in the way she spoke that made him believe her. She wasn't just explaining a concept, she was sharing a truth that existed beyond the confines of his understanding. He had thought the universe was a vast, cold, mechanical place, just a series of random events governed by physics and chance. But now, after what he had felt, he wasn't so sure. "Then why me?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Why did you come for me? What makes me special?" The woman tilted her head, her glowing eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel both seen and understood. "You are not just a survivor, Isaac," she said softly. "Humanity has a gift, one that not many species possess. The ability to create, to build, and most importantly, to connect. It is this gift that has drawn us to you." Another of the Rylith, the one with violet-hued skin, stepped forward, her eyes flickering with a mixture of curiosity and something like reverence. "Your species has always had the potential to connect with the stars, to influence the world around you through sheer will. Most humans don't even realize it. But you," she paused, as though weighing her words. "You are different. You've already begun to understand." Isaac's heart pounded in his chest. "I don't know what to do with this. This power, it feels like it's too big for me to control." The violet-skinned woman's lips quirked upward in a slight smile. "That is why we are here. To guide you. You are not alone in this, Isaac. We will help you understand, help you unlock the true potential of your kind." Isaac swallowed hard. The thought of unlocking some kind of cosmic power was both exhilarating and terrifying. He felt like a child standing before a vast ocean of knowledge, unsure of how to even dip his toes in without being overwhelmed. "But how do I begin?" he asked. "Where do I even start?" The woman with the silver skin, the one who had first reached out to him, stepped closer, her face serene and her expression unwavering. "You've already begun, Isaac. Your survival instinct, the will to live, is what has activated the connection. That is the first step. But now, you must learn to harness it, to control it, and to shape it." Isaac nodded slowly, trying to grasp her words. Control it, shape it. The idea felt foreign, almost impossible, but there was something deep inside him that wanted to believe it was possible. She smiled. "Yes. The power you feel within you is like a flame. At first, it is wild, uncontrollable. But with practice, you will learn to focus it, to direct it, and eventually, to use it to create, to heal, to protect." Isaac felt a shiver run down his spine at the thought. He had always believed that the universe was beyond human comprehension, beyond human influence. But here he was, standing in the midst of these beings who spoke as though humanity's potential was limitless. "What kind of things can I do?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The golden-skinned Rylith woman stepped forward once more, her expression filled with quiet strength. "You can do more than you realize, Isaac. You will be able to heal injuries, manipulate energy, communicate with the very fabric of reality itself. But that is not all. There is a greater purpose for you and your kind. You will be able to help unite the galaxy, to bring together races that have long been divided. But first, you must learn to master this gift." Isaac's mind raced. He had barely learned to survive, let alone contemplate the idea of wielding some kind of cosmic power. But there was something undeniable in their words. He could feel the potential within himself, the connection to the Rylith, to something greater. He didn't understand it fully, but he could sense the gravity of their message. "And what happens if I can't master it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Rylith women exchanged a brief glance, and the one with violet skin spoke again, her voice gentle but filled with a quiet resolve. "If you cannot master it, you will not reach your full potential. But we do not believe that will happen. You are stronger than you realize, Isaac. And you have something that few beings in the galaxy possess, the drive to connect, to learn, and to grow." Isaac let the weight of her words settle over him. He had always prided himself on being a survivor, on overcoming the odds. But this was different. This wasn't just about his survival, it was about something far larger. Something that would require him to transcend his own limitations and embrace a power that he had only just begun to comprehend. The first woman, the one with the silver skin, extended her hand to him once more, her eyes filled with unwavering trust. "Are you ready, Isaac?" Isaac hesitated for a moment, but only for a moment. He had been given a second chance at life, a life filled with unknowns, yes, but also with limitless possibilities. The survival instinct that had kept him alive on this desolate world was no longer enough. It was time to embrace something greater. He took her hand. "Yes," he said, his voice firm with newfound conviction. "I'm ready." And with that, the Rylith began to guide him, each of them reaching out, their hands glowing with a soft, radiant light. Isaac felt a deep, resonant power build within him, the warmth of the universe itself coursing through his veins. This was just the beginning. Isaac stood tall, his mind buzzing with the energy that the Rylith had awakened within him. The warmth that had coursed through his body during their initial training now simmered just beneath his skin, a constant reminder of the power that lay dormant inside him. But as the women gathered around him, their faces calm and composed, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The weight of their expectations, their faith in him, was a heavy mantle. The golden-skinned Rylith woman, whose name he had learned was Lasara, spoke first, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived centuries, if not millennia. "You have begun to understand the energy that connects all things, Isaac. But understanding is only the first step. Now, you must learn to control it, to wield it as a weapon and a tool, not just for your survival, but for the survival of your people." Isaac nodded, though his thoughts were far from clear. The idea of controlling this energy, of learning to manipulate it, seemed impossible. He was just a mechanic, a man who'd been thrown into a desperate survival situation. How could he possibly control something so vast, so unfathomable? Lasara seemed to sense his doubts. Her golden eyes softened. "You have already done more than many before you, Isaac. The cold could not take you. You survived because of your will. This will is what we are helping you awaken. Trust in it." The woman with the silver hair, Elora, who had been the one to first touch him and awaken his potential, stepped forward. "We are going to guide you through your first trial. You have to be ready. There will be moments when you feel the urge to give up. It is in those moments that your true strength will reveal itself. But we are here with you." Isaac looked around at them, the four women who had come to his aid, who believed in him more than he believed in himself. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he knew there was no turning back now. The trial had already begun. "What's the first step?" Isaac asked, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at him. Elora smiled, her eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. "We begin with focus." The four Rylith raised their hands in unison, their eyes glowing brighter, their energy flowing outward in soft waves. Isaac felt the air around him shift, vibrating with power, and the temperature seemed to rise, not from heat, but from the sheer force of their combined energy. He felt the energy within him react, pulling and shifting, responding to their motions, though he still couldn't fully understand how. "This is your first lesson," Lasara said, her voice echoing slightly in the charged atmosphere. "The energy is inside you, Isaac. But you must learn to direct it, to focus it on a single point. The energy you feel now is wild, untamed, much like the environment around you. Your first task is to harness it." Isaac closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind. The warmth, the energy, everything felt so overwhelming. He focused on the sensation in his chest, where he could feel the power flowing, and tried to narrow it down, to focus it in one spot. His breathing slowed as he pushed his thoughts aside, concentrating all his attention on the pulse of energy within him. The Rylith women circled around him, watching silently, their faces unreadable, though there was a hint of approval in their gazes. Isaac continued to focus, attempting to steady the wild surges of power within him. It felt as though his energy was too scattered, too chaotic. He felt as though he were trying to hold a river in his hands. A pulse of energy surged through his body, almost knocking him off his feet. It was not painful, but it was intense, too much for him to control in the moment. He staggered, catching himself on a nearby rock, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "Steady yourself," Elora said calmly, her voice like the soothing tone of a mentor. "It's not about forcing it. It's about guiding it. Let the energy flow, but do not let it overwhelm you." Isaac's chest heaved as he fought to steady himself, his mind still racing. He closed his eyes again, grounding himself, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing. The surge of power inside him still thrummed, but now he tried to shift his focus. Instead of attempting to push it all at once, he let the energy move of its own accord, guiding it slowly, step by step. The wild pulse inside him calmed, and he could feel the energy beginning to obey, beginning to bend to his will. He focused on a single point, the center of his chest, and allowed the warmth to spread from there, steady and controlled. For a moment, everything was still. There was no chaos, no surge of overwhelming power. Just him, the energy, and the connection between them. When he opened his eyes, he found that the air around him had become thick with a golden light, the power he had drawn from within him now radiating outward in soft waves, like a gentle aura. His chest felt warm, alive, and centered. It wasn't complete control, not yet, but it was a start. "Well done," Lasara said, her voice rich with pride. "You have learned the first step. The energy responds to you now. You must build on this." Isaac let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, his body still trembling slightly from the intensity of the experience. "That was harder than I thought." Elora smiled. "It always is, the first time. But the key is patience. You must not force it. The energy you wield is not something to be conquered, Isaac. It is something to be understood." Isaac nodded slowly. He could feel the energy still flowing within him, still pulsating, but now it felt less like an alien force and more like something he could learn to manage. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about understanding and controlling. "Now," Lasara continued, "the next part of your trial. The energy you've just harnessed is not meant for simple tasks. It is a tool of creation, of change. You must use it to alter the world around you, to heal, to build, and, when the time comes, to protect." Isaac's heart skipped a beat. "How? How do I do that?" Elora stepped forward, her hand extended. "Watch closely." In a swift, fluid motion, she raised her hand toward a nearby stone, and the energy within her flared. Isaac watched in awe as the stone shimmered, cracks appearing along its surface, before it melted into a pool of liquid rock, which then reformed into a new shape, a small statue of a bird. It was graceful and delicate, shimmering with the same ethereal energy that the rylith exuded. "Creation," Elora said softly. "The power you wield can shape the world. But it requires focus, purpose. You must learn to use the energy for something greater than yourself." Isaac stared at the statue, his mind racing. He had never imagined anything like this was possible. But if they could do it, maybe, just maybe, he could learn to do it too. "Now," Lasara said, her tone shifting to one of quiet command. "Your turn, Isaac. Shape the energy. Mold it into something new." Isaac stood there, frozen for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. The power was inside him, but what could he create? What did he even want to create? "Focus, Isaac," Elora urged. "What do you want to bring into being?" Isaac closed his eyes again, focusing on the power within him. He thought of his crash landing, the devastation he had left behind, and the uncertainty of the future. He thought of survival, but more than that, he thought of hope. A bird. A symbol of freedom, of life, of a future beyond the isolation. He raised his hand, feeling the energy building inside him, then directed it toward a nearby rock. It didn't feel as powerful as Ellora's display, but it was a start. Slowly, the rock began to shift, cracks forming along its surface, and, with a focused push, it began to twist and reshape into the form of a bird, rough and imperfect, but a bird nonetheless. Isaac smiled, a sense of accomplishment flooding through him. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. He had taken the first step. And the path ahead, though uncertain, felt a little more within reach. The bird Isaac had formed from the rock sat before him, rough and unpolished but undeniably real. His breath caught as he looked at the small, imperfect statue. It wasn't just a bird, it was a manifestation of the power he now wielded. His heart raced, knowing that he had taken his first steps into a vast and unknown realm, one that could change everything for him and, potentially, his people. The four Rylith stood around him, watching in silence. Lysara's golden eyes gleamed with pride, while Ellora's calm expression softened into something akin to approval. The other two women, Elena with her violet skin and Nereus, who was silver-haired like Ellora, offered quiet nods. Despite their stoic expressions, Isaac could sense that they were proud of him. "You did well," Lysara said, her voice a soft echo in the still air. "You focused, and you began to shape the energy, even if it was only a small creation. It is not about perfection at this stage. It is about learning to control the force that resides within you." Isaac nodded, still in awe of what he had done. He had created something from nothing, a feat that had been impossible just days ago. His hands still tingled from the experience, and the weight of what he had achieved settled heavily in his chest. This power was real, and it was growing. But what comes next? Isaac asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions he was feeling. "I've created something. But how do I use this energy for more than just making statues?" Ellora stepped forward, her silver hair glowing faintly in the growing light around them. "What you have done is but the first step. Isaac. You have created matter from nothing, but there is more you must learn. The energy you wield is not just for creation, it can be used for healing, for defense, for protection." Isaac felt a pang of uncertainty. He had no real experience with any of this. He had never thought of himself as someone who would wield power for such noble purposes. His survival had always been about brute force and making do with what he had. He wasn't a soldier, a leader, or a hero. He was just a man stranded on a strange planet. Lysara seemed to sense his hesitation. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "Your hesitation is natural. You are still learning, and with that learning comes doubt. But you must understand that this power is not just for you. It is for your people, for all of humanity. This gift is not one of self-indulgence. It is a tool, one that can protect, heal, and uplift. You must use it wisely, Isaac." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always believed that humans were insignificant in the grand scheme of things. We were just one species, among billions, in a universe so vast that it seemed impossible to have any real impact. But now, standing before these beings who saw something in him, something that went beyond survival, Isaac wasn't so sure. "What do you mean, for my people?" Isaac asked, his voice almost tentative. "I don't even know if there are any other humans alive. My ship crashed on this planet. I thought I was the last one." Elena, the violet-skinned Rylith, gave him a soft but reassuring smile. "There are always others, Isaac. Your people have been scattered across the stars for centuries. It is part of their nature to spread, to adapt, to survive. But there is a greater purpose for humanity. A role you will help them fulfill." Isaac shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around it. "I'm not sure I understand. You want me to be some kind of hero for humanity?" Nereus, the silver-haired Rylith, spoke this time, her voice soft but firm. "Not a hero, Isaac. A guide. A leader. You are the bridge between your kind and the greater galaxy. The power within you is the first step toward something much greater. Humanity is destined to unite with other species, to forge alliances, to bring peace where there has been none. Isaac's heart thundered in his chest. He wasn't sure what they saw in him, but he felt the truth in their words, even if he didn't fully understand it. The energy that now pulsed within him, it was a gift, but it was also a responsibility. And the thought of carrying that weight was overwhelming. Peace, Isaac repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. But how can I do that? I'm just one person. How can I unite anything? I'm not even sure how to control this power properly yet. Lasara smiled softly, stepping closer to him. The path will not be easy. But you are not alone. We will help you, teach you what we know. And once you have mastered this power, you will be able to lead humanity toward its destiny. Isaac's head swam with the enormity of what they were asking. He had spent his life on Earth, in a world that was fractured and divided. The thought of uniting all of humanity, much less leading a galactic movement, seemed impossible. And yet, something in him burned with a quiet certainty. But what if I fail? Isaac asked, the doubt creeping into his voice. What if I can't control it? What if I'm not strong enough? Elena reached out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You won't fail, Isaac. You may stumble, you may struggle, but you have something inside you that cannot be extinguished. Humanity's strength lies in its will to survive, to adapt, to fight for a better future. That is what you carry within you. Elora nodded in agreement. And you do not carry this power alone. We are here to guide you, to teach you. But ultimately, it is your choices, your will, that will shape the future of your people. Isaac looked down at his hands, feeling the energy hum beneath his skin, the weight of it both daunting and exhilarating. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was something more. Something greater. The weight of the task ahead seemed impossible to bear, but at the same time, he knew that he had no other choice but to rise to the challenge. This power was his to wield, and with it, he could do more than just survive. He could help shape the future of humanity, of the galaxy. I'll do it, Isaac said, his voice firm with determination. I'll learn. I'll lead. I don't know if I can be the leader you want me to be, but I'll try. Lasara's smile deepened, a glint of pride in her eyes. That is all we ask, Isaac. The road ahead will be long and fraught with challenges, but you will not walk it alone. Together, we will unlock the full potential of humanity. Together, we will build a future. Isaac looked out over the desolate landscape of the planet, the place where his journey had begun. The cold, the isolation, it all seemed distant now. A new path had opened before him, and though it was uncertain, it was one he was ready to walk. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear, he was no longer just a stranded human. He was something more. Something destined to make a difference. And in that moment, Isaac knew that he would stop at nothing to fulfill the promise that the Rylith had seen in him. Isaac stood on the edge of the rocky precipice, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked out over the barren world. The alien planet, once hostile and cold, now felt strangely familiar. The dark, stormy skies that had once seemed oppressive and suffocating now seemed like a canvas, waiting for him to paint a new future. The landscape, though harsh, held the potential for rebirth. It was the backdrop for his transformation, not just as a man, but as something more. The Rylith had given him a gift, a power that he had only begun to understand. But it wasn't just the ability to create or to manipulate energy, it was the strength to carry the weight of something much bigger than himself. Isaac felt it within him, a pull, a sense of purpose that anchored him to the future. We are ready to begin the next phase, Lasara's voice cut through the stillness. She, along with Elora, Elena, and Neris, stood behind him, their presence a quiet reassurance. Their energy, powerful yet calm, resonated with his own, each of them contributing to the collective force that had awakened inside him. Isaac turned to face them, his gaze steady. What's the next phase? Ilena stepped forward, her violet skin glowing under the dim light. Now, Isaac, we begin to test your control. You have learned to focus the energy and to shape it, but control is more than creating forms. It is about understanding the ebb and flow of power. Knowing when to act, when to hold back. Isaac nodded. He had learned to make things, simple things, like the bird, and he had healed a broken stone, but there was more to it. He could feel the energy surging inside him, waiting to be used, but he had no idea how to direct it for anything other than small-scale acts of creation. Now, it was time to take it further. It was time to face what was coming. The trial, Lasara began, her tone serious, will be to test your ability to manipulate the energy in complex ways. Not just to create, but to influence the environment around you, to change it in a way that aids in survival. You will need to adapt quickly, Isaac. The world around you does not wait for you to catch up. Isaac's thoughts raced. Could he really do it? Could he harness the power of the Rylith, control the forces that seemed so alien to him, and use them to shape this world, and humanity's place in it? Elora smiled, her eyes warm. This world may seem barren, but it is full of hidden potential. The power you've tapped into is not just from within you. It is from the land, the stars, the very fabric of existence. The Rylith understand this better than anyone. Isaac took a deep breath, centering himself. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he was ready to face whatever came next. He had to be. I'm ready, Isaac said. He could feel the weight of the Rylith's gazes on him, but he wasn't afraid. He had come this far, and now, the next step awaited. Lasara raised a hand, her golden eyes flashing as she focused her own energy. Then let us begin. Without warning, the ground beneath Isaac's feet began to tremble. He felt the energy in the air shift, becoming thick with intent. He raised his hand instinctively, feeling the current of power flow toward him. The Rylith women watched closely, their faces impassive but filled with a quiet anticipation. Isaac focused, willing the energy to obey, to bend to his will. He felt it surge within him, responding to his command. But this time, he didn't just try to create. He reached deeper, beyond himself, to the pulse of the land itself. The earth beneath him cracked, a deep fissure splitting the rock at his feet. The sound was deafening, and for a moment, Isaac hesitated, unsure of what was happening. But the Rylith did not flinch. They stood tall, waiting. The fissure widened, and from the depths, Isaac could feel the flow of energy that surged upward. It was not just his own power, but the power of the world itself. The soil, the stones, the air, it all seemed to converge, to channel toward him. The energy hummed louder, faster, filling his senses. Suddenly, the ground shifted violently, and with a sharp burst of energy, Isaac raised his hand, channeling the force into the sky. The air cracked, the wind howling as a column of energy shot upward, spiraling like a vortex. It was wild, uncontrolled at first, but as Isaac focused, it began to settle. The swirling vortex slowed, and Isaac felt his control solidify. He had done it. The air around him shimmered with the power he had unleashed. He looked up at the swirling vortex, watching as the energy it held began to stabilize. The land around him seemed to respond, trees, plants, rocks, the environment was shifting, changing. Focus, Isaac, Lasara's voice rang in his ears. Don't let it overwhelm you. Isaac's breathing slowed as he tightened his focus. The wind howled less fiercely now, the vortex slowing until it was little more than a gentle spiral of energy, suspended in the air. He felt it, the power of the planet, of the universe itself, flowing through him, steady and strong. His heart pounded in his chest. The weight of the energy was overwhelming, but he could feel it becoming a part of him. The power that he had once feared was now something he could understand, something he could control. Finally, the energy began to dissipate, slowly sinking back into the ground, the sky, the earth. The vibration ceased, and the air returned to its normal state. Isaac stood alone, his hands still raised, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The Rylith gathered around him, their expressions unreadable. He couldn't tell if he had succeeded or failed. His muscles ached from the strain, but there was something else. A deep, quiet certainty. "You've done well, Isaac," Lasara said, her voice soft with approval. "You have taken the first step toward mastering your power. But this is just the beginning. The true test will come when you must use this power to protect your people." Isaac lowered his hand, his body trembling slightly from the exertion. He felt the weight of her words, the enormity of what was ahead. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had done something no human had ever done before. He had tapped into a force beyond himself and bent it to his will. And with that power, he could do anything. "What's next?" Isaac asked, his voice steady despite the fatigue that lingered in his body. He knew there would be more trials, more challenges, but he was ready. Lasara smiled. "Now, you begin the journey to unite humanity with the stars. You will bring hope, strength, and wisdom to your people, Isaac. You will guide them toward a future where they no longer stand alone. You will lead them into the greater galaxy." Isaac nodded. The journey ahead was uncertain, but the Rylith had shown him the path. And now, he understood that his role was not just to survive, but to thrive, to build a future for his people, to bring humanity into its rightful place among the stars. The first step had been taken, and Isaac was no longer just a stranded human. He was a bridge between his kind and the universe beyond. And as the Rylith stood by his side, he knew that the future was his to shape. The landscape of the alien planet stretched out before Isaac, a barren expanse of rock and dust illuminated by the soft glow of twin moons. But as he stood there, his heart no longer felt heavy. It wasn't the oppressive weight of isolation that once haunted him. No, Isaac had become something more, a bridge between worlds, a new kind of leader. A person with a purpose greater than mere survival. The Rylith women stood beside him, silent yet supportive, their presence a reassuring constant as he gazed into the vast unknown. There was still much to learn, much to achieve, but for the first time since his crash landing, Isaac felt a surge of hope. He wasn't alone in this journey, and that made all the difference. "You've come a long way, Isaac," Ellora's voice broke the quiet, soft yet tinged with pride. From the man who shivered in the cold, unsure of his next step, to a force capable of shaping the future. Isaac glanced at her, and the warmth of her gaze filled him with quiet strength. The transformation had been more than physical, it was spiritual, emotional. He had tapped into a well of power he never knew existed. But it wasn't just the raw energy that had changed him, it was his mind. His understanding of what it meant to be human. To not merely survive, but to rise. "I never imagined this path," Isaac replied, his voice steady, "that I could go from barely surviving on a desolate world to leading humanity into the stars." Lasara's golden eyes gleamed as she nodded, her voice clear. "The Rylith were once scattered across the galaxy, isolated, but we found our way through unity. And we see that same potential in you. Humanity has always had the will to survive, but now, you have the tools to shape that will into something greater." Isaac's mind swirled with the possibilities. The energy within him felt like a part of his very being, vibrating through his veins, humming just beneath the surface. But it wasn't just about power. The knowledge that he now carried was even more significant. It was about bringing his people together, about showing them that there was more to life than just the world they knew. They could thrive, explore, and protect what mattered. "I understand," Isaac said. "I never thought humanity had much of a place in the greater universe. But with what you've taught me, I realize that we are not just survivors. We have the potential to unite, to create something larger than ourselves." Ellora placed a gentle hand on Isaac's shoulder, her voice filled with warmth. "Exactly. It's not just about survival, Isaac. It's about thriving. And it begins with you." A quiet, respectful silence fell over them. Isaac thought about all he had learned from the Rylith, from the ancient teachings of their people. He thought about his own people, humanity. His mind wandered to Earth, to the conflicts, the struggles, and the fractured world he had left behind. But now, he saw a future he hadn't imagined. A future where humanity could be more than a divided race, fighting for survival in an indifferent galaxy. You've unlocked something within yourself, Isaac, Nereus's voice pulled him back from his thoughts. But this is only the beginning. You are not just a leader for humanity, you are the first of many. Others like you will awaken to the potential that lies within. Isaac felt the weight of her words, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Was he ready to lead an entire species? Could he guide them to a future where peace and unity were possible? He wasn't sure he was ready for that responsibility, but deep down, he knew there was no turning back now. We're here to guide you, Ilena added. But the path is yours to carve. The galaxy is vast, and it's waiting for you. Isaac nodded, the enormity of the task ahead settling over him. But he wasn't afraid. He had seen the potential in himself, in humanity, and now it was time to make it real. You're right, Isaac said, taking a deep breath. The galaxy is waiting. And I'll be ready when the time comes. Lysara smiled, her eyes filled with a mix of pride and understanding. The universe is a vast and complex place. There will be challenges. There will be obstacles, forces that may try to push humanity back, but as you grow, Isaac, you will learn how to face them. And you will shape the future. Isaac turned his gaze back to the horizon. The planet, though inhospitable, had given him more than just survival. It had provided him with the catalyst for something bigger. For the first time, he saw beyond the horizon. He saw humanity's future, not as a scattered species clinging to its past, but as part of a greater, cosmic tapestry, a future where humanity's potential would not just be realized, but celebrated. The moons above him glowed softly, a reminder of the vastness of the universe. Isaac could feel the pull of the stars now, not as a distant, unreachable dream, but as a beckoning force. He was no longer the broken human stranded on a foreign planet. He was someone who had tasted the power of creation, of unity, and of peace. And now, he would carry that flame forward. What do we do next? Isaac asked, his voice filled with determination. How do we start? We begin by looking inward, Lysara replied, and learning to harness this power fully. Then, we must reach out. There are many species across the galaxy who will be curious about you, Isaac. Some will come with open hearts, while others may be more cautious, even hostile. But humanity's strength lies not in dominance, but in connection. Elora nodded. You must show the galaxy that humanity is not just a species to be feared or dismissed. You must prove that humanity is a force for good. You will lead not through power, but through compassion, wisdom, and strength of character. Isaac felt the weight of their words. He had spent his life fighting to survive. Now, he had to fight to lead, not with weapons, but with the strength of his convictions. The path ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. I understand, Isaac said, his voice resolute. I'll do whatever it takes. Lysara's smile deepened. Good. Because the first step will not be easy. But with the power within you, and the wisdom of the Rylith to guide you, there is no limit to what you can achieve. Isaac's gaze lifted toward the stars once more. He felt it, the pull of destiny, the connection to something greater than himself. Humanity's future was no longer uncertain. It was a path that had already been set in motion, and he, Isaac, would be the one to lead them into it. And as the 4 Rylith women stood at his side, Isaac knew that he was not alone. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but it would also be filled with hope. The stars were calling, and he was ready to answer. The universe had waited for humanity, and now, humanity was ready to meet it. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.